Hello and welcome to this course on dashboarding in Excel. Before we get onto the hands-on part, let's get started with more detailed introduction to various kind of charts and graphs that we can create in Excel with respect to data type, uses and their pros and cons. First, we will look after line graph. So a line graph, a bar graph and a histogram, they work on the principle of a number line, wherein we have an x-axis and also a y-axis, wherein I am understanding or I'm trying to understand the muffins that have been sold in a week's time. So my data labels are on the x-axis, whereas my measurements that are in the quantity terms are on the y-axis. And here it tells me that on Monday I was able to sell 5 muffins and on Tuesday I was able to sell 6. Then again it went down on Wednesday, and on Saturday and Sunday I was able to sell the maximum number of muffins. Same way, not only for week but also for monthly, quarterly and yearly analysis can be done easily using a line graph. The data type that the line graph works on is continuous. I would need a continuous data set to be able to plot a line graph. The uses that a line graph has is that it is designed to reveal trends, progress or changes that occur over a time. So there has to be a time and another parameter on which I can plot my graph. Again, coming to pros and cons. Pros, it is easy to read and understand. And cons, too many data labels can make the graph look cluttered. Say if I would have taken more data labels into it, I would have had to plot too many lines or too many peaks. So that would look the data or the graph look more cluttered. Secondly, we have plotted a bar graph over here. And here we have asked 145 people about their preferences of various fruits. So as you can see that we have also given the color according to the kind of fruit that they have preferring. So here it says that it is a frequency chart. What do we mean by frequency? A frequency is nothing but a range. Here we have taken a range, say 5 to 10 is a range, 10 to 15 is also a range. So whenever a range comes into the picture, it's nothing but a frequency. So a frequency is on the y-axis and the data labels or the categories are on the x-axis. That is why it is the data type that a bar graph can be used on is a categorical data. So something that has a category or a genre. So whenever a category comes into the picture, a bar graph is the preferred choice of the chart that should be plotted. Coming to uses, it can be accessed to know the most occurring to the least occurring categories in the data set. Here I know that blueberry is the preferred choice of fruit and grapes is the least preferred choice of fruit. So we can easily understand by plotting a bar graph. Now working with lengthier labels. Working with lengthier labels means that I can see the change in 2 data points, a huge change in 2 data points. Here I have too much of the data available for blueberry but less of the data available for the grapes. Even then it is easy for me to understand the difference between the two. Displaying negative numbers. As I mentioned, that bar graphs, they work on the number line rule. So I can also plot the numbers not only positive, but also the negative numbers or the negative values that I have. I can compare 10 or more items. So if I want, I can add more fruits and I can plot more data in it. So I can compare more items into it. Pros, we can easily compare many categories within the data set. So we have already discussed about that. Cons, they require additional explanation. So if I wouldn't have said about the range or how many preference of the people were asked, it would have been difficult to understand just looking by the numbers. So I would have to provide an additional explanation as to what I have considered while plotting the graph. Then it also fails to tell me the assumptions, causes and effects or patterns. So here there is no peak. So I wouldn't understand what are the various patterns with which the data points are working or on what direction my data is moving on. Coming to histogram. A histogram is a frequency distribution chart or data arranged in consecutive and non-overlapping intervals or classes called as bins. So in school, I'm sure we must have understood about the frequency distribution. Say 25 to 35 or 35 to 45. So here I'm mentioning a distribution just like we did in a bar graph. Same way we are also doing it in histogram. Here, the only thing that those range is called as bins or classes. Coming to the data type, it works on numerical and continuous data. So my data has to be continuous because there are various ranges that my data follows. Uses, it can be used to access most occurring to least occurring categories in a data set. So here we have plotted the age over the frequency, and we can also see that the people of the age 50 to 60 are more in a particular population data set that was taken. So it is easy to understand. It also measures the central tendency and variability. So what do we mean by central tendency is nothing but mean, median, and mode. So it is also easy for us to calculate that in histogram. It also tells me the skewness of the data. So whether my data is negative or positive skewed, it will, it from analysis point of view, it can also tell me that. It is easy to recognize outliers. Now, what do we mean by outliers? Outliers are points that do not fit or they do not follow a certain pattern of the range within which a particular data point falls. So those outliers are easily detected using a histogram when a particular point does not fall into any kind of range. It cannot be used for qualitative data. Coming to pie chart. A pie chart represents one static number divided into categories that constitutes its individual proportions. When you sum up all the separate portions, they should add up to 100. So here we have taken the sales of various laptops. When I add all these numbers, I should get 100. So it is a sales report of laptops. It belongs to the same category, but it has divided slices of a pie or divided slices of the percentage data. When I add all this, it should add up to 100. That is what a pie diagram should look like. Now coming to what kind of data type can be plotted using a pie chart. Numerical amounts of data in the form of percentage can be plotted using a pie chart. Where are they used? Mostly they are especially helpful in digital marketing, as you can use them to show a breakdown of market shares, marketing expenditures, customer demographics, customer device usage, and online traffic sources. This is the best example when we talk about a pie diagram. Say I want to understand in the evening time which is the most visited website or which is the most visited social media site people prefer. So say my 22% is Facebook, 33% is Instagram, and so on and so forth. So it is easy for me to understand when I give a percentages to when I show into percentage form in a pie diagram. It can emphasize data when there are only few units. So I have a single report with various categories. So it is only emphasizing that data, but it fails to give me any other kind of information apart from that. So unhelpful when observing trends over time. I cannot plot a pie diagram over time, and I cannot compare more than few pieces of data. Coming to scatter plot. So scatter plot is nothing but again it follows the rule line, and these are various points plotted on a graph paper. So it follows the numerical data type. Then the users are comparing the data points. I can compare the data points or I can tell that which data point is falling under which range. Again, we can do that. It can compare two data points even when the dependent variable may have many independent variables. So my dependent variable has many values, but independent variable is one. So when I want to compare that, it will be easy when I use a scatter plot, because analyzing the range in a scatter plot is very easy. Say it is the late packaging. So there are certain parcels which are not packaged in time. So this is the total order. This is the late packaging numbers or the units that we have. So how many total orders are there versus the late packaging numbers. So how many are left, even though when it's not there in the graph, but we can understand when we plot the graph. So it can only compare two data points. I cannot add up one more into it and compare, unlike in a bubble chart. So in a bubble chart also follows a numerical variable. It is basically points or bubbles plotted on a graph paper, as you can already see. It is primarily used to show the relationship or patterns between numeric variables. So when I want to see any kind of correlation between the various data points, in that case a bubble chart is preferred. It can compare between three variables, unlike scatter plot. I can also add additional variable into it and do the comparison. It is difficult to interpret. When you look at the bubble graph, I don't think interpretation is easy, so it is difficult to interpret. Thermometer chart is the chart which tells us about the goals that we were expecting to achieve and the goals that we have achieved. The data type that is used is actual value versus the target value. A few uses being, it is used to analyze sales performance of regions or sales representative or employee satisfaction ratings versus the target value. The pros being, it tells us how much of the goals we have achieved, and con being, it's a bit time consuming to make because it is a customizable chart. Talking about Pareto chart was named after Vilfredo Pareto. He was an Italian economist who brought about this chart wherein there is bar graphs and also there is the line emerging out of it, a line graph emerging out of it. Here we are analyzing the reasons where the employees were late to reach the office. So the reasons, various reasons are traffic, childcare, public transportation, weather, then overslept and emergency. So it is telling us the reasons of where employees have failed to reach on time. Now, the data type that can be used to analyze it is categorical data. Since there are bar graphs involved, it can be used to analyze categorical data. Uses, it is used in product management, quality control, customer analysis, etc. It tells us where the problem is occurring, but it will not give any insight as to what is the root cause of the problems. So these are the various points that we discussed on how to decide which chart to make. We will move on to the hands-on part in the coming videos. Thank you.